Remember when Peter Jackson used to make gross, tasteless, repellent movies? And I don't just mean The Lovely Bones.
You gotta just walk up to Frank, just look him in the eye and just say, Frank, give me what I want, I'ma bust your ass!
J.R.R. Tolkien is one of the classiest figures in literary history. He was a respected professor and gave us one of the most classically romantic and culturally influential book series ever written. So when it came time to adapt his works into one of the most universally praised trilogies of all time, why not give it to the guy who made a puppet movie filled with sex, drugs, and gory violence? Peter Jackson started his career in the rural fields of his homeland New Zealand. Bad Taste was his first feature-length film, following a group of rough-and-tumble special forces as they wander around a sheep paddock in an old house. The movie is a typical example of the kind of gonzo filmmaking that made so many budding directors into cult legends. Jackson himself had to play two parts, one of which is a zombie-like local who ends up dragged by a car for several feet. They accomplish this by having Jackson dragged by a car for several feet. That's the directorial equivalent of leading the cavalry charge from the front.
Bye-bye.
Someday I hope I can make a movie where I don't end up dragged by a car for several feet, but you know what? You gotta suffer for your art. And if you watch The Lovely Bones, you have to suffer because of his art. He followed up that movie with a film about the secret, debauched lives of the puppet performers of a children's television show. Meet the Feebles was the Greg the Bunny of its day. Sorry, is that reference too dated at this point? Meet the Feebles was the Happy Time Murders of its day. Except, you know, Meet the Feebles was actually pretty good. Real attention came his way, however, with Brain Dead, which was retitled as Dead Alive in its US release. This zombie gore film had a unique twist on the common movie monster, as well as one of the most memorable lawnmower-based sequences in cinema history. Made on a typically low budget, Dead Alive was a huge success amongst horror fans and Fangoria subscribers across the globe. Over the next few years, Jackson would work on transitioning from New Zealand to the Hollywood system. This included an unproduced script for a sixth Freddy movie and a few projects that ended up equally unmade. However, he would get his chance at translating his love of slapstick and gore into a major Hollywood production.
Don't go saying nothing to the boys, but my ectoplasm is all dried up.
The Frighteners was his first big break, and it would also end up being the final film of Jackson's career. That is, his career as a horror comedy director. That isn't to say that these influences wouldn't be seen through the rest of his career. The Lord of the Rings still had room for skull-faced ghosts, and King Kong did have those worm monsters that will forever haunt my dreams. However, he never made a movie like Bad Taste, Meet the Feebles, or Dead Alive ever again. The Frighteners ended up being a very transitory movie for the director, and one that has both the markers of where he came from and where he was going. So what is The Frighteners and how does it fit into Jackson's overall career? The movie stars Michael J. Fox in one of his last major non-animated film leads. 1996 was kind of a last hurrah for Fox the movie star, with Mars Attacks coming out this same year. From then on out, it was all Spin City and Stuart Little. And yeah, the Parkinsons. Fox likely became attached thanks to the film's executive producer and almost director Robert Zemeckis. The Frighteners really wants you to know that Zemeckis is involved. I burped. I'm a class act like Peter Jackson. He's the first name you see, and his influence is all over the film's, at the time, cutting-edge CGI, which was also the first-time work of Jackson's own little startup, Weta, or Weta, or Wet-A. I think it's Weta. I'm gonna get Weta watching this movie. That was gross. Like Peter Jackson, the film's score is also done by Danny Elfman, bringing the full Beetlejuice ambience to this ghostly story. It's almost like Jackson was being eased into American audiences with a sugarcoating of familiarity. However, that's all on the surface. The guts of this movie is very much based in Jackson's early work. Fox plays Frank Bannister, a psychic investigator and all-round living mess. He lives in a very Zemeckis-toned small town in a house that is still mostly frame and raw lumber. He also has a neat little scam that would make Mr. Beast envious. It turns out Bannister is an actual medium who can see and interact with the ghosts around him. Instead of using this to help people, he instead teams up with a few sympathetic specters. They go into the target's home and haunt it for a few hours. He then arrives and exorcises the supposed evil spirits. He gets paid and the ghosts get, well, a continuing promise that they will eventually get something.
That fellow takes us totally for granted. And we're supposed to be his business partners. What a joke.
They mostly stick around out of obligation and a genuine love of Frank himself. However, the town has fallen under the specter of death. People are having their hearts crushed by a Grim Reaper-looking ghost that only Frank can see. He is joined by a few others investigating the same deaths. There is a local woman whose own husband fell victim to the ghostly killer. Don't feel too bad though, he was a huge dick.
Well, that's just terrific, honey. We've been in town for 3 months, and you're making friends with the Manson family.
There's also an eccentric and hostile FBI agent played by Jeffrey Combs at his goddamn peak. Seriously, this is Jeffrey at his Combsiest. In one scene, he gives a monologue about Bannister's tragic backstory. While the scene is written in a very Law & Order, just the facts way, Combs' inflections, eccentricities, and body language are all so over the top and yet precise that it builds both Frank's and his character simultaneously. It's also just so damned funny.
At Jesson's hardware store and building supply on the corner of 3rd and Garrett. 3rd and Garrett. 3rd of July. 7 plates. 3.
Milton, you're mumbling.
Especially how he slowly moves further away from the people he's talking to until he's in the other room entirely. All of the murders have to do with a spree killer from the town's past, played delightfully evilly by Jake Busey. Next to Starship Troopers, this may be his most Buseyest performance. The only survivor of his crime was his 15-year-old girlfriend Patricia, who was either an unwilling accomplice or just as guilty. A now adult Patricia is played by perennial 80s mom Dee Wallace. In her most undealy. It's not the usual kind of performance for her, is what I'm trying to say. I may have taken this East thing a little too far. This is all a really great setup for the kind of 90s supernatural spectacle film that forever followed in the Ghostbusters footsteps. However, the Jackson is in the details. The ghosts of the movie have that wonderful mix of a translucent cover over a great deal of practical makeup. The judge especially has this amazing makeup job on his lower jaw, where it fully looks like it's only hanging on by the last few remaining tendons. It's a plot point that the ghosts still rot, meaning that there is a lot of opportunity for goop, a favorite of early Jackson. Just thinking about that porridge scene. Oh god, I'm gonna puke just thinking about it. I'm gonna puke. There is also a tremendous amount of dynamism in the camera work, with interesting shots, framing, and color tone. The climactic sequence in an abandoned hospital is especially well done, as well as directly reminiscent of his next film. The green lighting and tense action is reused in The Mines of Moria in Fellowship, while the ethereal and brightly exposed flashbacks to Bartlett's crimes would help Jackson with how he shot elves 5 years later. I mean, like, how he shot them with his camera in the movie, cinematography-wise. He wasn't out there with a shotgun just hunting elves, I don't think. Those are elements that make The Frighteners an interesting rewatch when it comes to Jackson's career. It's like a Terminator line between what he was as a director and what he would become. While he's found a new creative drive in recent years by abandoning the Hollywood system that he worked so hard to break into, it's been as a documentarian and producer. Before he hangs up his director's chair entirely, I would like to see him return to his horror comedy roots at least once. While Sam Raimi never fully abandoned his, Jackson seems to have moved far beyond movies about rat monkeys and puppets fucking.
What do you want?
Our encounter this afternoon was so brief. I thought you might like a second helping.
Heidi!
Alright everybody, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and share this video to other people you think might enjoy it. Let me know your thoughts in the comments on the Frighteners and Jackson's career as a whole. Alright everybody, stay safe, and be who you are.